Good day, grade 11 learners. Welcome to Life Sciences lesson. My name is Ntombi Dladla. This lesson is brought to you by Sci-Bono Discovery Center in collaboration with Gauteng Department of Education. Let's quickly look into it. Today's topic is the human impact on the environment, and the focus will be on the greenhouses, the ozone depletion, as well as the greenhouse effect. Now, grade 11s, we all know that humans depend on the environment for survival. However, our activities or human activities are causing a severe problems in the natural environment because humans or us, we are producing more waste than the ecosystem can cope. As you can see, all this waste is being produced by us. As a result, our environmental equilibrium is disturbed and the quality of life on Earth is also threatened. Now, I want us to distinguish between the two terminology. I want us to define climate. I also want us to define climate change, and we'll be able to observe or to see the difference between the two terminology. Now, when we talk of climate, we are simply referring to the average weather conditions. And then the weather conditions can be determined by the temperature, can be determined by the rainfall, and they can also be determined by air pressure. And then as I'm saying that the climate is the average weather condition of a large area in a very large space over a long period of time. That is climate. Now, when we talk of climate change, it is when there's any change or there's any disturbance to that established climate pattern. So when there's a change in this average weather condition, or when there's disturbance in this average weather condition, that is referred to as climate change. And climate change has been happening in the past and is still taking place even right now. Now, the two terminology that will be going through our lessons or today's lessons, we've got the greenhouse gases as well as the emissions. Now, we should be in position to do what? To define greenhouse gases. And then the greenhouse gases are shortened as the GHGs. So when we talk of the GHGs, we are simply referring to the greenhouse gases. So what are the greenhouse gases? The greenhouse gases are the gases which are trapped, which trap heat in the environment. And the two main greenhouse gases that we all know, we've got carbon dioxide as well as what? As methane. So the two main greenhouse gases that are found on the atmosphere, we will be talking of the carbon dioxide as well as the methane. And then what are we talking about when we talk of emissions? When we talk of emissions, we are simply referring to the release of what? Of these greenhouse gases. And then the emission means that the released gases are always harmful to the environment. In other words, these greenhouse gases which are released to the atmosphere are very, very harmful. And then the release of these gases is referred to as what? As emissions. Now, how is the atmosphere composed? The atmosphere is made up of a mixture of gases which sustain life. Now, the main gas that is found on the atmosphere is nitrogen, and nitrogen contributes about 78% into the atmosphere, followed by oxygen, and then oxygen contributes about 21% into the atmosphere. Now, when you add the two main gases, when you add the concentration of nitrogen as well as the concentration of oxygen into the atmosphere, they all add up to 99%, meaning that they leave 1% for what? For all other small gases. And then with this 1%, about 93% of the gases which are contributing to the 1% is carbon dioxide, and then the 7% will be the what? The small amounts of other gases. Now, this diagram shows us how the atmosphere is composed. As I have alluded earlier on, that in the atmosphere, most of the gas that is found there is nitrogen. So nitrogen contributes about 78% into the atmosphere, and then followed by what? By oxygen. And then oxygen gives us what? It gives us 21%. So both gases add up to 99%. Now it leaves only 1%, as you can see. This 1% is now enlarged into the second diagram. So in this 1%, there's 93% of what? Of carbon dioxide. I want to emphasize this. I am not saying that there's 93% of carbon dioxide in the whole atmosphere. No. In that one remaining 1% remaining, it means that about 93% is carbon dioxide, and then the 7% will be the small traces of other gases, your neon, your helium, and other methane and other gases. So it means that 1% that is remained from the 78, as well as the 78 and the 21, is contributing carbon dioxide, which has what? Which has 93%, and the remaining 7% will be other small traces of what? Of other gases. Now, I want us to look into the greenhouses. The first one will be the greenhouse gases. The first one will be carbon dioxide. I want us to look into the sources of carbon dioxide. Where is this carbon dioxide produced? What releases carbon dioxide? Now, the first emission of carbon dioxide is through cellular respiration. We all know that during the process of cellular respiration, carbon dioxide is exhaled, and it is exhaled by us humans as well as animals. So that carbon dioxide that we are exhaling during cellular respiration goes to the atmosphere. The second source is when there's decomposition of dead plants as well as animals. When dead plants and animals are decomposing, they release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The other source is through the burning of fossil fuels as an energy source for electricity or for transport. We know that most of the time when we need source of energy for electricity or for transport, there will always be the burning of fuels. So during this burning of fuels, carbon dioxide is released. Where is it released to? It is released into the atmosphere. The other source of carbon dioxide is through chemical reactions when in the cement industry and as well as the production of fertilizers. So during this process, carbon dioxide is also released. The last source of carbon dioxide is when we make field fires, as you can see, when we make field fires and when we make our domestic wood burning. Also, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. So these are basically the sources of what? Of carbon dioxide emissions. The second gas, or the second greenhouse gas, is the methane. Now remember that methane is the second largest contributor to the enhanced greenhouse effect. And our activities, the human activities contributes about 60 or over 60% of the total methane in the atmosphere. In other words, the 60% that is produced, the 60% of methane that is produced into the atmosphere, it is because of our own doings. It is because of human activities. So you can see that most of the methane that is produced, 60%, even over that, it is because of our own doings. Now let us look into the emission or the sources of what? Of methanes. Where do we get methane? So the first one, methane can be released during the natural anaerobic decomposition of organic materials. For an example, in the wetlands, as you can see here, when there is natural anaerobic decomposition of these organic materials, methane is released. Secondly, we know that the methane bubbles are trapped in the ice in the polar regions, they are also trapped in the permafrost. Now, what is happening? When these ice in the polar region as well as the ice in the permafrost melt, what does that mean? It means that they will be releasing those bubbles of what? Of methane, meaning that methane will also be emitted into the atmosphere. The other source is through industrial or mining processes. So through industrial and mining processes, methane is also released. How so? When there is refining of fossil fuels, remember when there's refining of fossil fuels, for an example, when we want crude oil as well as gas, through that process, methane is released. Secondly, under the very same industrial or mining process, there is drilling. So when there's drilling or when there's fracking of natural gas, now you can see that a rich gas or natural gas is trapped here on the or in the sediments. Now when during this mining process, when they drill, when they want to get this trapped gas, what is happening during this drilling or during this fracking? What is happening? The methane will be released into the atmosphere. Now, this picture shows us that people were picketing, people were marching against the industrial or mining processes. People were against the refining of fossil fuels. Why? Because they know that during this process, methane is released into the atmosphere. They were also picketing. They were also marching that the fracking or the drilling of the natural gases should be banned. Why should it be banned? Because they know that during this process whereby the fracking or the drilling of for natural gases, when this process is happening, what is happening? The methane will be released into the atmosphere. So this picture shows us that most of the people are aware that during the industrial processes, more methane is released into the atmosphere. And then other source of methane emission is through the seawater. In the seawater, what is happening? When the marine organisms or when aquatic organisms decay and decompose, what is happening? They release the methane bubbles in that seawater. Secondly, when the sea or the ocean temperature rises, when we look into this graph shows us that in the 1880s, between the 1880s and the 1940s, the temperature of the sea, of the ocean was very low. It was even below 0%. It went down up to negative 0.6, as you can see here. But as years went by, from the 1940s, it started to do what now? To increase. And then the temperature of the ocean increased above 0.0 degrees Celsius. Now you can see that it shows the increase in the temperature where in the ocean. Now when the temperature in the ocean increases, what does that mean? It means that there will be more methane that will be released. Why? Because of the high temperatures in the in the sea. So that releases or that emits methane. The other methane emission is through intensive agriculture. For an example, when there is decomposing of dung as well as compost for fertilizing, what is released into the atmosphere? That methane, because we all need compost so that we can do the fertilizers. Our crops are growing very, very well. But through this process, what is also released into the atmosphere is the methane. Secondly, the gas that is being released by the ruminants. When we talk of ruminants, we are simply talking about animals which are having two stomachs. So though the gas that is released by such animals, the gas that is released by ruminants is what? Is methane. Is not carbon dioxide, but it is methane because they are double stomached. And then the last sources of methane is through the landfill sites. When in the landfill sites, there's a high concentration of of methane that is released into the atmosphere. Secondly, in the wastewater, for example, our sewage releases a lot of methane. So those were the emissions of methane. Now let us look into other content of greenhouse gases. There's a gas that we all know which is called water vapor, and you know that water vapor is the largest gas that is the largest gas that has the largest volume of greenhouse that is warming the planet naturally. So there's enough of water vapor, and it is warming the planet naturally. However, we are still having small amounts of other gases or of other greenhouse gases which are contributing to the global warming. So those gases are nitrous oxide. We'll talk of the ozone, as well as the CFCs. Now, the CFCs is the abbreviation, or is the shortened name for chlorofluorocarbons. So, for you not to forget that big word, you are very, very welcomed to use the CFC for the word chlorofluorocarbon. So, these are the three greenhouse gases which are also contributing to global warming. I want us now to look into the sources of the nitrous oxide. Where is it coming from? What releases the nitrous oxide? Now, remember, most of the time we like to burning. Now, when there's burning of wood as well as burning of fossil fuel, so what is released into the atmosphere is the nitrous oxide. Again, when there's a biological processes which break down the organic material or the organic matter, whether in the soil or in the sea, when there's that biological process whereby there is a breaking down of the organic material, can either be on the terrestrial environment or in the aquatic environment. Anyway, the nitrous oxide is released. And then lastly, the last source of a nitrous oxide is when nitrogen fertilizers are being used or are used for commercial farming. So they also release nitrous oxide. The second greenhouse gas that contributes to the global warming is the CFCs. So remember, you are very, very welcome to use CFCs for chlorofluorocarbons. So it is very, very acceptable. You are not going to get it wrong if you write it in an abbreviation manner. Now, where can we get the CFCs? They are found mainly on the aerosol sprays. You can see here on the picture. They are found in the solvents. They are found in the fridges. They are also found in the foams which are used for the fast food packaging. The packaging for the fast food that we are using, those packages are releasing the chlorofluorocarbons, or they are releasing the CFCs. Now, the CFCs are very, very harmful to the ozone layer. Remember, the ozone layer is somewhere up there. So there's another ozone layer is somewhere up there. So these chlorofluorocarbons are very, very, very harmful to the ozone layer because they produce the chlorine atoms. They release the chlorine atoms, and which will be exposed on the ultraviolet radiation. So they are very, very harmful. So we must always be careful when we are using our aerosols. Whatever we are using, we should at least package them in a very safe environment so that they cannot be in the atmosphere. And then the third gas is an ozone. So what is an ozone? Ozone is a reactive gas which is made up of 3 oxygen atoms. So those 3 oxygen atoms, as you can see, they are bounded together. Therefore, they form what we call an ozone. Ozone can either be helpful or it can be harmful. It depends on where on the atmosphere is occurring. For an example, the ozone that is occurring on the lower parts of the atmosphere is very, very harmful. But the ozone that is occurring on the upper parts of the atmosphere, the ozone that is occurring on the stratosphere is the upper part of the atmosphere. This ozone is very, very helpful. It's different from the ozone that is occurring on the lower parts. This one is very, very harmful. However, the one that is occurring on the upper parts of the atmosphere, the one that is occurring on the stratosphere, is very helpful. Why is it helpful? Because it protects the life on Earth. How so? By absorbing all the ultraviolet radiation. In other words, all this ultraviolet energy radiation will be absorbed by what? By this ozone, which is on the upper part. As a result, the life on Earth will be protected. Now, I want us to look into the phenomenon which is referred to as ozone depletion. We've seen that an ozone is the gas which is very, very helpful. The one that is occurring on the stratosphere is very, very helpful. But if it starts to deplete, what causes that? In the 1970s, a hole was discovered by the scientists. So this hole was starting to form on the ozone layer, on the solar, towards the south poles. So this hole was starting to develop. The hole was starting to develop where? On the southern polar regions. Because of what? Because maybe of our activities. So what happened? What does that mean if they say the hole was starting to develop? It means that on the ozone layer started to do what now? To become thin. It was thinning. It was even disappearing. So if it becomes thin, it means that it is no longer as thick as it was supposed to. So it started to become thin. And then as it was thinning, it even started to do what? To disappear. So what does that mean? It means that it now allows the ultraviolet radiation to penetrate now into what? Into the atmosphere because of its depletion. For the fact that it started to become thin, it started to disappear. Therefore, it allowed the ultraviolet sun rays to do what? To penetrate into what? Into the atmosphere. And the scientists are referring to this depletion, to this phenomenon as ozone depletion. As you can see, when we look into these two diagrams here, we can see that the ozone was starting to do what? To become thin. It was also depleting. So it is different from this one. This one, it is showing a very strong long waves, whereas this one, it is now showing weak long waves. In the 1980s, it had that thick ozone layer, but as time went by, it started to fade away. It started to become thin. It started to disappear. So this is what was happening. Can you see? The strong long waves started to disappear, meaning that the ozone layer started to do what now? To deplete. And then as a result, it is able to allow now, it allows the ultraviolet rays to do what? To penetrate into the atmosphere because of the ozone layer depleting. Now, what are the effects of ozone depletion? What are the effects of ozone depletion? Remember, we said if the ozone is depleted, meaning that it is able to do what? To allow the sun rays to do what? It allows the ultraviolet rays to do what? To penetrate into the atmosphere. Now, what are the effects of that? It causes the damage to human. There will be human damage. How so? Because if humans are exposed to ultraviolet radiation, meaning that our immune system will become very, very weak, and then that will lead into the skin cancer. It will lead into the sunburns. It will also cause the skin aging. So this shows how the ultraviolet radiation are damaging humans. It will also cause cataracts in our eyes. Our eyes will start to develop the cataracts because we are always exposed to the ultraviolet radiation, and it will also cause the damage into the chromosome. So if the chromosome is damaged, then that will lead to mutation, meaning that the chromosomes are damaged. And then the other effects of of ozone depletion is that it damages the agriculture. How so? The ultraviolet radiation will start to interfere with what now? With photosynthesis. As a result, the plant will grow slow. So if the plants grow slow, what does that mean? It means that the food security will be threatened because plants are growing very, very, very slow. If plants are growing very slow, it means that we are not going to have what? We are not going to have food. Therefore, food security is threatened. It also damages marine. So all the marine life or the marine organisms will do what? Will be damaged because of what? Because of the ultraviolet radiation. Remember, even the ultraviolet radiation can penetrate into what? Into the aquatic land or into the marine life, meaning that all the organisms that are in water will also be damaged because they will be exposed into the excessive ultraviolet radiation. Lastly, the effect of ozone depletion is that it also damages material. In other words, it will break down woods, it will break down plastics, it will break down rubber, it will also break down the textiles that are used for construction material. Can you see that the depletion or the ozone depletion has so many effects, and we have contributed to the ozone depletion. As human beings, we have contributed into this ozone depletion. Now, I want us to look into an enhanced greenhouse effect. Now, an enhanced greenhouse effect is also referred to as a climate change. And remember, when we started with our lesson, we have a defined climate change, that if there's any disturbance or if there's any change in an established climate, that is called climate change. Now, enhanced greenhouse effect are also referred to as climate change, or they are also referred to as global warming. Now, with this, it is the impact on the climate from the additional heat that is retained due to the increased amount of what? Of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. And that is because of us human beings, because since this industrial revolution, we are contributing a lot into the release of these greenhouse gases. Now, I want us to look into these two diagrams. The first diagram, both diagrams are showing us the human influence on the greenhouse effect. Now, the first diagram shows us the natural greenhouse effect. Now, with this first diagram, we can see that there are greenhouse gases, but they are reasonable. They are not too much. The concentration or the amount of these greenhouse gases on the atmosphere are very, very acceptable. Now, with this natural greenhouse effect, what is happening when there's solar radiation? When we talk of solar radiation, we are simply referring to the transfer of heat energy. Now, there's solar radiation, meaning that the heat energy that is coming from the sun passes the space, and then it goes into what? Into the atmosphere. So because of the greenhouse gases which are acceptable, what is happening? There will be less heat that will be absorbed in the atmosphere, and that less heat will be re-radiated into the atmosphere, and more heat will be re-radiated back into the space, meaning that more heat will go back into what? Into the space, whereas less heat will reach the what? The atmosphere. This is under the natural greenhouse effect. More heat goes back into the space and less heat penetrates into the atmosphere because of the reasonable amount of greenhouse gases. However, when we look into the greenhouse effect that is intensified by us, what is happening? There's also a solar radiation, meaning that heat energy is transferred from the sun and then into the space. Then it goes into what now? Into the atmosphere. Remember, this greenhouse effect is intensified by us, meaning that on the atmosphere, there are high concentration of greenhouse gases. There's a lot of carbon dioxide, there's a high concentration of methane, there's a high concentration of nitrous oxide. In an actual fact, there's a high concentration of all the greenhouse gases, meaning that our atmosphere is having a lot of greenhouse gases. Now, what happens when there's solar radiation? The solar, meaning that the heat energy will move from the sun, gets into the space, and then penetrate into where? Into the atmosphere. How is this atmosphere? The atmosphere is highly concentrated with what? With the greenhouse gases. So meaning that more heat will be absorbed in the what? In the atmosphere. As a result, there will be more radiation there will be more radiation of what? Of heat into what? Into the atmosphere, meaning that more heat will escape into the atmosphere, whereas less heat goes back into the space. It is a very big difference when it is compared to the natural one. With the natural one, more heat goes back to the space and less heat goes into the atmosphere. But with the one that is intensified by us, more heat is trapped and more heat goes into the atmosphere. Less heat goes back into the what? Into the space. Now, I want us to look into the effects now of global warming. I want us to look into the effects of enhanced greenhouse, or the effects of enhanced greenhouse effect. Now, the first effect is that it caused the coastal flooding. This is the first effect of what? Of global warming, that it causes the coastal flooding. How so? Remember, I've just explained that. Let me go back to the previous slide, that on the atmosphere now, because of what? Because of high concentration of what? Of greenhouse gases, more heat is now where? On the atmosphere. So if more heat is on the atmosphere, what does that mean? Let me go back to this slide. It means that the temperature is rising sharply, so, and it results now in an increased number of number of heat waves. Why? I'm going back again. Why there's an increase in the number of heat waves? It is because more heat has penetrated into the atmosphere. That's why now there will be what? That's why there will be more, or there will be more number of more heat waves, which are alternating with the extreme weather conditions such as powerful storms. Can you see here? It shows that there is a very, very high number of heat waves on the atmosphere. Because of what? Because more heat has escaped into the atmosphere. Secondly, the rising sea levels will cause the coastal flooding. As you can see on this picture, the rising on sea levels are causing the coastal flooding. Many coastal cities are vanishing because of the coastal flooding. And then when we look into these two pictures, they show us that the Pacific Ocean islands are now disappearing because of what? Because of the rise of sea levels. And that is happening because of the melting polar caps. So when polar caps are melting, they cause what? They cause the Pacific Ocean islands to do what? To disappear because of what? Because of the rise in sea level. When sea levels are rising, they definitely affect the islands. The other factor is that we all know the Venice. Venice is that popular tourist attraction, and then it is now starting to sink away. We can see on this diagram that the Venice is starting to sink away because of the rise of sea levels. Again, those rise in sea levels are being caused by what? By the melting of polar caps. When the ice melts, of course, it will cause the coastal flooding. The second effect is the flooding. Now, Pakistan has about 7,000 glaciers that are melting. When you talk of glaciers, we are simply referring to the area that is surrounded by ice. So if about 7,000 glaciers are melting, what does that mean? We all know when you take an ice and put it on the hot temperature or where there's a high temperature, what is happening with that ice? It melts, meaning that it will become the solid will become a liquid, meaning that the ice will now become water. So just imagine how about the 7,000 glaciers? What will happen if they melt? They will cause water together with storm, then that it causes floods. Therefore, the cities will start to do what? To flood. There will be flooding in the cities because of the melting of the glaciers together with what? Together with storms. So they cause that flooding in the cities. The third effect of global warming, this is the third one, it is through the changing of rainfall patterns. When the rainfall patterns are changing, definitely that is because of what? Of global warming. So the rainfall, when the rainfall patterns change, what happens? It means that the areas which used to have a plentiful rain are now slowly turned into what? Into desert area, because there's no longer rain in those areas which used to have rain. So that is because of what? Of the rainfall patterns. That is because of the climate change, meaning that those areas which used to have plentiful rain, they are now starting not to have rain at all. What does that mean? It means that those areas will be turned into desert. And it's what we always see. Secondly, those the areas which used to get plentiful rain, they are now because there's no longer rainfall in such areas. What does that mean? It means that droughts will start to take place. And if droughts start to take place, what does that mean? It means that there will be more frequent fires. As you can see here in Australia, there's more frequent fires because of drought, and then the soil will become eroded. There will be soil erosion. There will also be the area will turn into desert. That's why we'll say there will also be desertification. Because of what? Because of rainfall patterns. There's no longer rain in those specific or particular areas. So they start to become dry, and then the land become deserts. The soil start to erode. That's where we experience soil erosion. And then still under the effect of changing rainfall patterns, once dry areas are now getting high volumes of what? Of rains. Remember, in Gauteng, it's good because here we are, Gauteng is our province. You will bear witnesses that in the past, Gauteng used to be a very dry area. But because of changing rainfall patterns, we are now experiencing what? We are now experiencing floods. For an example, and when you look into this first picture, you will remember, even though some of you were still young, but 2016 is not long that long ago. We experienced floods in Midrand here in Gauteng. In the N1 highway, there were floods in Midrand. In Krugersdorp, January 2016, there were floods. Why? Because Gauteng used to be a very dry area, but because of the change in rainfall patterns, now we started to receive volumes and volumes of rain, and that led to floods. The fourth effect of global warming is food production. What does that mean? Because of global warming, food production will definitely decrease. Crops, you can see, crops are starting to do what? Are starting to dry because they cannot adapt in a very dry areas. So if the area is dry, definitely crops, if are not adapting, what is going to happen with them? They are going to die. As you can see, we see dead crops. And what does that mean? It increases food insecurity. So food security is threatened because of what? Because of global warming. And then desertification. What are we talking about when we talk of desertification? When we talk of desertification, we are simply referring to a fertile land that is becoming a desert. So when a land where we can plant, a very fertile land, when it starts to become a desert, that process is called desertification. And it is said that about 33% of land is now becoming desert. And that puts 1 billion of people at risk of what? Of famine. And in South Africa, about 90% is classified of desert or as semi-desert. So you can see that. And on a desert or on a semi-desert areas, we cannot plant. There's no plantation that can take place. So it is very, very bad. And deforestation, what is meant by deforestation? When we talk of deforestation, we are simply referring to the large-scale destruction. When the large-scale destruction of what? Of indigenous forest, which is done by us, by humans, by felling or by burning trees and bush to clear space for other processes. When we start to fell or to burn trees as well as indigenous forest for our own purposes, that process is referred to as what? As deforestation. So deforestation is the destruction of indigenous forest by humans. How so? When we are felling down, when we are burning trees or bushes to clear the space, that is called deforestation. And then what is happening? This is estimated to contribute about 20% of the total global greenhouse gas emission. In other words, deforestation contributes about 20% into the greenhouse emissions. Why do we need forests? Why do we need vegetation? So that there's food source, so that there's food security, so that the climate, for the climate effect, and again for erosion as well as sustainable agriculture, lastly for the world's life. So these are the main reasons, these are the main important factors on why do we need forests. Now, what are the causes of deforestation? Why is deforestation happening? Remember, I said deforestation is the removal of vegetation, is the removal of forest, is the removal of indigenous vegetation. So, what causes that? Why? Number one, it is because of the land clearance. So, why are we clearing the land? For our own benefits, for farming and urban developments. That's why we clear lands. Secondly, there's the cause of deforestation. It is for commercial logging. Why commercial logging? Because the indigenous timber, we need the indigenous timber to supply the world market demands. Again, is for our own benefits. Why? What is the other cause of deforestation? Because there is a removal of commercial plantations of non-indigenous as well as the fast-growing trees. So we are removing all these. Can either be a non-indigenous or indigenous or fast-growing trees. Why are we removing them? So that we can be able to supply timber for what? For building, and timber for making paper. So why? It is also for our own benefit. The other factor or the other cause of deforestation for mining processes. Why? Vegetation is cleared or burned to enable a large, so that we've got a very large scale for mining processes. So this is also for industrialization. It benefits us. It's for commercial benefits. And then we also, the other cause is for fuel. Why fuel? Trees are cut down to supply firewood. Trees are cut down to supply charcoal for what? For those without gas or for those without electricity. In other words, we are cutting all those trees down so that we will be able to supply firewood for those who are not having electricity. We will be able to supply charcoals for those who are not without electricity or gas. So it also benefits us. The last three causes for traditional medicine. Most of the traditional healers are using the indigenous trees, and then you can see here they will start to do what? To stripe off the bark of the trees. Some are also using the roots so that they can meet the increasing demands of the traditional medicine. So for the traditional healers, they are cutting down the trees, they are cutting down the forest so that they can reach the higher demands for their traditional medicines. The other second last cause for it is used for forest fires. So forest fires can either be deliberate, we cause the forest fires, or they can also be accidental. But anyway, the vegetation is disturbed, the vegetation is destroyed because of what? Because of the forest fires. Lastly, it is the cause, it could be the acid rain. Remember that the acid rain weakens the trees by damaging their leaves. When you look into this picture, you can see that we are only these trees are only left with the stems. All the leaves are being damaged because of what? Because of acid rain. And it also limits the nutrient uptake. It is also poisonous to what? To these trees. Eventually, these trees will do what? Will die off. So that could be, the acid rain could also be the cause of deforestation. How does deforestation contribute to global warming? Firstly, the slash down and the slash and burn technique is used to clear the forest. When we slash down or when we burn the vegetation, for clearing the forest, carbon dioxide will be released. Destruction of living trees reduces the amount of photosynthesis. When can you see on this picture, there are living trees, and where there's living trees, the rate of photosynthesis is very, very high. But if we start now to do what? To remove these living trees, what does that mean? It means that the process of photosynthesis will reduce. And if the process of photosynthesis reduces, meaning that we won't have enough trees to absorb the carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere, meaning that the carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere will still remain in the atmosphere because of the removal of these trees. So if the living trees are being cut down or are being distracted, meaning that there will not be any process of photosynthesis. So it does what? It makes the concentration or the amount of carbon dioxide to remain high on the atmosphere. And then the other cause is that it will change the surface albedo. It will also change the amount of water vapor that is released into the atmosphere. What are the effects of the forest act as a natural carbon sink. If we talk of natural carbon sink, it means that forests are absorbing carbon dioxide. That's why they are referred to as the natural carbon sink. So what does that mean? It means that they will be able to absorb carbon dioxide during the process of photosynthesis. And when they die, and when these forests die, what does that mean? It means that carbon dioxide, when they die and decompose, that carbon dioxide will become part of the humus in the soil, and then it will enable the new plants to do what? To grow again, meaning that we'll always be having what? The carbon sinks, will always be having the forest. In other words, carbon dioxide will always be absorbed by what? By this forest. However, if these forests are now distracted, or if these forests are now cut down, what does that mean? It means that carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere will still remain there, and it will contribute to the global warming. The other effect is that when we during the manufacturing of wood, during the manufacturing of paper, carbon dioxide is also released. During this process, when paper is made, or when paper is produced, carbon dioxide is released. When there's manufacturing of wood, carbon dioxide is released. And all of these activities are benefiting humans, but they are distracting, or they are destroying the atmosphere or the environment. The other effect of deforestation is that it causes soil degradation from the nitrogen loss, and then the soil will be exposed now into what? It will be exposed to the wind, and then that will also cause water erosion. Can you see? Water is no longer absorbed by what? By a soil which is being eroded. So more frequent flooding and mudslides will occur, because vegetation cannot absorb what? Heavy rainfall. In other words, the reduced vegetation cannot absorb what? Heavy rainfall. So that's why you can see that now there's flooding that is taking place because of soil erosion, and then there's mudslides which are also occurring because of the soil that does not have enough vegetation. Such soil cannot be able to absorb heavy rainfalls. As a result, it causes flooding as well as mudslides. Desertification and extinction, that those could also be the effects of what? Of deforestation. Deforestation causes the desertification. It also causes the extinction of other species. In other words, if biodiversity is disturbed, what does that mean? It means that organisms which adapted to live maybe on a very fertile land, or which are adapted to live on forest, because of desertification, what happens? It means that their environment was disturbed. They are no longer a forest. What does that mean? It means that they will die up until they face extinction. So extinction is also the effect of what? Of deforestation. Desertification is also the effect of deforestation, and it is estimated that about 50,000 species are disappearing annually. And if about 50,000 species disappear annually, what does that mean? It means eventually all these species will be facing what? Extinction. Will end up with no species anymore. And then the last point of today's content is carbon footprint. What are we talking about when we talk of carbon footprint? When we talk of carbon footprint, we are simply referring to the total amount of carbon dioxide that is emitted, that is released by an individual, can be that is released by one person, or that can also be released by a group in 1 year. That is referred to as carbon footprint. Carbon footprint is the total amount of oxygen released by one person or by a group in 1 year. Now, when you look into these 2 food, the first food is a food that has a light carbon footprint. What does that mean? It means that it does not have the high concentration or the high quantity of carbon dioxide. This is a footprint that has a small quantity of carbon dioxide. So this is a footprint we must all have. And then the second footprint is a footprint that has a heavy carbon dioxide, meaning that here, that's where there's a lot of carbon dioxide emission. So meaning that we must not have that footprint. The correct footprint that all of us should have is the one that has a light carbon footprint. So it is an activity time, grade 11s. Yes, the first activity or the first question is our multiple choice. We all know how to tackle or how to answer the multiple choice questions. We start by eliminating all the wrong answers and at least be left with 2 possible answers. And out of the 2, you'll be able to have the most correct answer. Now, the first question says, which one of the following combination of gases are the main cause of global warming? Is it carbon dioxide and ozone? Is it CFCs and carbon dioxide? Is it methane and carbon dioxide? Or is it CFCs and methane? What is the correct answer there? So the correct answer will be C, methane and carbon dioxide. Second question is the biological term. You need to provide the correct biological terminology for the 3 statements. I want to give you a minute just to give me the biological terminology for the 3 definitions or for the 3 descriptions. For a minute, I'll get back to you. Okay, we are back, grade 11s. The first description, the total amount of carbon dioxide of carbon released to the atmosphere by an individual, a community, or a factory per year. What do we call that? Second description, the layer in the atmosphere that makes the ultraviolet light harmless. The third one, increase in temperatures throughout the earth. Yes, here are the answers. Total amount of carbon released to the atmosphere by an individual, a community, or a factory per year, that is carbon footprint. The layer in the atmosphere that makes ultraviolet light harmless is an ozone. An increase in temperatures throughout the earth, that is global warming. Activity 2.1, describe the difference between climate and climate change. What are we talking about when we talk of climate, and what is the climate change? Climate refers to the average weather patterns, and then the weather patterns are determined by rainfall, temperature, and air pressure of a large area over a long period of time. That is climate. And what is a climate change? Climate change refers to any change or any disturbance to an established climate pattern. So you cannot afford to lose that 2 marks for the climate and 2 marks for climate change. So that 4 marks is very, very important. Name 4 sources of methane. So here the question says name. You just name. You don't have to describe. You just name. So if they say name 4 sources of methane, by naming one source is 1 mark. So you are going to get 4 marks for that. So what are the sources of methane? We get methane through natural anaerobic decomposition of organic material. When the ice in the polar regions and permafrost melt, they release methane. The termite population feeding on dead trees because of logging, they release methane. Industrial and mining processes release methane. Intensive agriculture, the ruminants, those animals with 2 stomachs, they release methane. In the landfill sites, there's methane. In the wastewater, there's also methane. So you've got so many sources, but the question wanted you to name only 4. So this one was taken from a Free State paper in September 2020. This was from, grade 12 then, because this topic was done in grade 12 before the syllabus changed. So let me quickly read the source, and then we'll get into the question. Over 18 million hectares have burned in the Australian bushfire season 2019 to 2020, destroying over 5,900 buildings, including over 2,800 homes. In addition to human fatalities, many millions of animals are reported to have been killed. The world's terrestrial biodiversity is concentrated in forests. They are home to more than 80% of all terrestrial species of animals and plants. When forests burn, the biodiversity on which humans depend for their long-term survival also disappears, with over 1 million species currently facing extinction. So there's a link for the source, which was written in 2019. Now the first question says, name one way that can lead to a loss of biodiversity. Name one way that can lead to a loss of biodiversity. The second question says, discuss 3 reasons. Discuss three reasons which biodiversity is important. Why biodiversity is important to ensure the survival of humans. Discuss 3 reasons why biodiversity is important to ensure survival of humans. So the first answer on name one way that can lead to loss of biodiversity. Poaching can lead to loss of biodiversity. Alien plant invasion can lead to loss of biodiversity. And we can talk about any habitat destruction. Any example of habitat destruction can also lead to loss of biodiversity. Habitat destruction, for example, poor farming methods, urbanization, deforestation, mining, Gulf estate, any of the examples that you can provide that talks to the destruction of habitats, you are also going to get a mark for that. So the question wanted only one way, but can you see we've got so many ways that can lead to a loss of biodiversity. The second question says, discuss 3 reasons why biodiversity is important to ensure the survival of humans. it ensures the biodiversity is important because it ensures food, fresh water for humans, because it can be obtained from the environment. Now, before I can get to the second explanation, when the question says discuss or explain, you must always give the cause and the effect. For an example, on the first one, it ensures food, or it ensures fresh water for humans. It ensures that is the cause. And then what is the effect? The effect is that because it can be obtained from the environment. Do you see how do you get your 2 marks? Secondly, it is that various plant species provides medicine. Why? For the treatment of diseases. You see how you are supposed to answer the explain or the discuss question. It is important because various plant species provide medicine. It's a tick for that. It provides medicine. It's a tick for that. Why? Because it is needed for what? For the treatment of diseases and ailments. It's another tick. That is how you get your 2 marks. And then the third reason, it is that it is a source of fossil fuel. Okay, it's a mark there for that. It is a source of fossil fuel. Yes. So what? Because which means humans need to generate heat, or humans need to generate heat for cooking or for making food, whatever the example you may give. So that's how you get your 2 marks. The last reason is that it ensures that climate is regulated. Okay, it's a tick. It ensures that climate is regulated. Why? It is regulated, therefore floods are controlled in the wetlands, and it is protecting humans. Because floods are being controlled there, then humans are being protected. Do you see how you get your 2 marks? So you don't just say it ensures food. So what? Meaning that you're going to get 1 mark. You are not going to get full 2 marks for that. So every time when you answer the explain or the discuss, it means that you must give us the cause and the reason. It ensures food. Why? Because it can be obtained from the environment. You see how to answer such questions. So you must not give us one as if they said to you name. When they say to you name, you just say pouching. You have named it. But if they say discuss or explain, then you must give the cause as well as the effect. And then the activity 3.2, the following table shows the estimated amount of solid waste and the amount of recyclable material dumped in South African city landfill site over a number of years. So here we are given a table. Here is our table with 3 columns. The first column, it's years from 2018 to 2021, and then the second one is the total number of the total amount of solid waste in millions of tons. The third one is the amount of recyclable material in solid waste, also in millions of tons. So we are given data for this, and we are also given data on the recyclable material. The first question says, describe the general trend in the total amount of waste produced and the amount of recyclable materials dumped from 2018 to 2021. So in other words, you need to read into your table. You need to check the trends. What is happening here on the solid waste, and what is happening again here on the recyclable material over time, over years. So I want to give just a second on I want you to look into the trend, what is happening here and what is also happening on the other side, looking into the data provided on this side and looking into the data provided on the other side. So you can see now that in 2018 for the solid waste, in 2018 it was 1.49, 2019 1.59, 2020 1.80, 2021 1.93. I want you to make a prediction out of that. Secondly, here it was 0.78, and then followed by in 2019 0.82, in 2020 1.20, and in 2021 1.30. So what is the trend then? Yes, it is that both of them are increasing from 2018 to 2019. Both of the materials, the solid one as well as the recyclable, are increasing over years. Both of them, the total amount of waste produced as well as the amount of recyclable material increased from 2018 to 2021. 2 marks for Mahala. The second question says, explain 2 advantages of recycling. We all know the advantages of recycling, and there's the main one that we all know. We see our parents, we see our relatives, we see our friends who are always collecting cans, who are always collecting bottles, and so on. Why are they doing that? So it's very simple. And for 4 marks, remember the question says explain. You are not naming. So remember, when you explain, you give us the cause and the reason. You give us the cause and the effect. The first one, people collect and sell waste at buyback centers. You see, it's a cause. Why? So that they can benefit economically. That is it. They benefit economically, or that creates jobs. Secondly, people who collect waste and take it to the recycling depots. They are collect and take the recycling to the, they take the waste to the recycling depots. That is a tick. Why? So that that will contribute to the sustainable use of materials, meaning that the very same materials will be reused. The last one is that recycling saves energy. So if recycling saves energy, what does that mean? It means that it reduces the amount of energy that will be used to make the new products. You see the explain question, how you answer it. So you give us the cause and then you give us the effect. So these are all the advantages of what? Of recycling. 3.3 says, how could people reduce their carbon footprint? Remember, the carbon footprint, it's when there's a high amount of carbon dioxide that is emitted into the atmosphere. How can we reduce the carbon footprint? So these are the possible ways on how to reduce the carbon footprint. The first one, refuse to waste. The second one, reduce burning of wood, burning of gas and coal. And then the other one, reuse products whenever possible. The other factor that can reduce the carbon footprint, it's through recycling. Whatever material that can be recycled, let us try by all means to recycle them. Repair clothes, repair furniture, repair appliances, to decrease the market demand. If clothes are thrown out, just repair them. If furniture is broken, try to repair them. That will decrease the market demand. And then we must all start by now to do what? To replant all the indigenous vegetation as carbon sinks. Remember, we said the forests are the carbon sinks. And we also need to renew the ways of producing energy and making items. So we must always be creative and innovative. Yes. So these are all the possible factors that could reduce the carbon footprint. So that takes us to the end of our lesson, grade 11. I am sure you have learned a lot from today's lesson, and the topic that we are doing today is the topic that you'll be doing this week, starting from when schools reopened on Tuesday, and then it will be the last day of it tomorrow. So you'll be able at least to understand and to answer all the questions based on that. Until we meet next time, have a very productive day. Bye-bye.